Welcome to Zambition, the channel on which we engage in dialogue with leaders from across sectors and generations. Greetings and welcome to Zambition. My name is Martin Kalungubanda, your host on this channel. Today I have the pleasure, the privilege and joy of being in dialogue with one of Zambia's most renowned lawyers. His name is John Sangwa. Mr. Sangwa studied law at the University of Zambia and the University of California. He is a lecturer at the University of Zambia School of Law. Mr. Sangwa co-founded the Legal Resources Foundation, an organization that focuses on the promotion of human rights. He is the former chairman of the Media Law Reform Committee, which was appointed by the government of the Republic of Zambia in the year 2000 to identify statutory provisions which undermine media freedom. Mr. Sangwa has taken up many social justice issues, including the eligibility of President Lungu in the elections we just had on the 12th of August. We will feature Mr. Sangwa in two parts. Part one, we will look at his beginnings and how he came to do and to be the things that he is doing and being in our society. Part two, we will look on what his ambition is. Mr. Sangwa, welcome to Zambition.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
May I start by inviting you to share with us your personal journey, your journey that has led you to where you are today, in whichever way you choose to share that with us.
Okay, it's a very interesting question because not many people have asked me that. It's an issue that came up in my discussion with one of my friends. Let me put it this way, that whatever I have done and whatever I am today, he was able to link it to the fact that I became born again at the age of 14. Yes, that decision was monumental, was significant in shaping me to be the person that I am today. When the rest of my colleagues were busy running around, smoking and drinking, I was not doing any of those things. And I didn't come from a family of plenty, but I came from a family that made me realize quite early that the key to lifting myself from the position where I was education. And for me growing up, the coolest person was not the person who came from a good family or who had more money than I did, but the coolest person was the person who had read more books than I had. So we were competing in terms of how many novels one had read, because growing up that time, apart from drinking, smoking, and going to discourse, then the only thing you could do is to read. And fortunately for me, when I look back, I don't think I ever went to discourse. So my life was basically defined by books. And I tend to agree with my friend in the sense that that decision, I think, saved me from a number of other activities that I could have gotten into. What made me realize that, I think, was the realization this year that I felt that sense that, uh, especially, I mean, I always avoid trying to blow up my own trumpet, but I felt like whatever I have done this year was a lot of things came to make sense in my life. It's like I was born for this moment and to accomplish or play my role at this point in time in the history of this country. You know, it's like all the pieces, everything that I've done in my life and whatever, everything just came to converge at this, especially this year. You get that sense to say, I was born for this purpose, you know, and I've never felt that way before, but I think I felt that more this year. And I think it made a lot of sense in the sense that, by the way, my initial plan was actually to be an engineer, not to be a lawyer. But you know, the Lord works in mysterious ways. And I found myself without any grades in sciences. And I ended up in the humanities. And when I look back, if you ask me, is there anything that I can rewrite about my career? The answer is no. Being a lawyer, I think, was meant for this purpose. And what is also interesting is that of all the courses that were there in law school, I ended up having a very keen interest in public law, and that is constitutional law and administrative law. And at undergraduate, at undergraduate level, I did very well in these two courses. Then after finishing my undergraduate program, I went to what is now known as Ziale. Then it was known as LPI, Legal Practice Institute. I finished that. And I remember the day I finished my uh, LPI exam. For the first time, I felt so vulnerable in the sense that all my life I was hiding under this shield that I was a student. So nobody could call upon me to meet my social obligation because there was always this cover to say, no, leave him alone, he's a student. What can he do? He's a student. But all of a sudden, I found myself in a situation where I said that shield was no longer there. And I found myself thinking, so, well, what am I going to do? And I realized that the question was, how can I maximize the qualification I had? Then I came to the conclusion that there were two things I could do. I could practice law and I could also teach law. Then I said, okay, practice, I've qualified. What about teaching? Well, at the minimum, the university wanted a master's degree for you to be able to teach. So I went to UNZA and enrolled in the staff development fellowship program. And I did my master's. And what was also fascinating was the fact that my master's was it was only by research, and it was also in the area of public law. And when I finished my studies, there were now moves to embark on another constitution making exercise. Then that made me think as to why have we had so many constitution making exercises. And my thesis was basically in the area of constitutional law. I investigated this particular exercise, and the title of my thesis is The Making and Remaking of Constitutions in Zambia and the Need for a New Perspective. And all these, I think, were the building blocks of my career. And I finished that. And immediately thereafter, I finished and I became a full-time member of staff of the university. And I think I was there, I joined in 1990 and I left in 2010. And that was, I was there for 20 years. And I think my joining UNZA was not about money. It was more about realizing that I am a very fortunate person. How can I give back to my country, a country that has been fair to me, a country that has given me a fair chance, a fair shot at life? How can I give back? And it was also an exciting period in the sense that we are all excited about democracy and how do we actualize the principles of democracy. And one of the realization was that, well, democracy cannot thrive in an environment where people are ignorant. Okay, so my going to teach was to be able to contribute towards the emergence of a group of students that were well schooled in the law and especially in the area of public law. It was about really giving back to this country. But also, I was able to benefit in the sense that the teaching experience, you know, you couldn't teach without, first of all, you can't go and feed the student without feeding yourself, you know. So it enabled me to constantly to be abreast of the developments and everything else. And so that I can be, you know, at the end of that exercise, I think there were only 2 resolutions I ever made in my life. And that were that one, I have to be the best lawyer I can be. And secondly, the best lecturer I can be. And for the next 20 years, that is all I did. And God's will may have it, when it came to my practice, the bulk of the area of practice was actually in the area of public law and constitutional law. So I've had a very, very exciting career in the sense that, you know, I have taught what I've practiced, okay, and practice what I have taught. You know, I don't think that many people can claim that kind of experience from a career standpoint. So my driving force has been that, given what I know and the fact that I had the privilege of standing in front of students and preaching to them about all these constitutional principles, it became very difficult for me to sit quiet and watch these principles being violated, you know. So for me then, it was not just a matter of theory, it is also a matter of practice, you know. So when the issue came up, when President Lungu wanted to stand for a 3rd term, so going to court for me was inevitable, because I'd made it clear, based on my understanding of the Constitution, it clearly was not qualified. And although the court has ruled otherwise, I respect what the court ruled, but I remain unshaken in my conviction that the man was not qualified to stand for the 3rd time. For me, this has been a very exciting period, is that we have seen our constitutional system come to life. You find the various safeguards we have in our Constitution. Some safeguards failed and others kicked in to be able to make sure that at the end of the day, the will of the people is respected.
And that's what truly leads me to my next question, because to many people, Mr. Sangwa, you come across as someone who stubbornly sticks to his values and principles. And by the way, I didn't even know that background of you becoming a born-again Christian at the age of 14. But I must say, you freely speak your mind, and you seem not to be bothered by the status of those who, in your judgment, might be breaking the law or are acting unjustly. And whether it means taking on someone as high-ranking as a head of state, where does this type of character come from, apart from your Christian connection? What gives you the courage to fight against injustice?
You know, I think it's part of my journey, okay? And so for me, doing such things, I mean, it's not, I don't look at it as something special. It's not. You know, by virtue of what I have experienced, what I've gone through, I have come to realize that, you know, a president, okay, is just a human being. It's just a normal human being. You know, their only uniqueness is the fact that they have had the privilege of occupying this office that only 7 people now in 56 years of independence have occupied that office, you know? So take away the office, they're not different from you and I, you know? And I was able to see, you know, I've been privileged to interact with, I think, the 6 presidents, except for one, okay? I've been privileged to interact with all the 6, all the, of this, with the, to interact with the six people that have gone on to occupy the office of president. So I've interacted with them before they went into office and after leaving office. And one of the things you come to realize, I mean, you know, it's very difficult to get an insight into this thing. Let me just give you an example very quickly. I mean, the first time, I mean, I had first interaction with power was with the first president, Kenneth Kaunda. This was, I think, in 1991. And I remember growing up, we were singing, the Bemba song was, Kumulu, Lesa, Panshi, Kaunda. You know, I don't know whether you remember those.
I do. God in heaven, on earth, it's Kaunda.
That's right. So basically, we gave Kaunda a godly status here on earth, basically, you know, and it was quite amazing for me towards when the end of his presidency was unfolding, beginning in 1989, 1990, and 1991, I was able to see this once very powerful man who could simply snap his finger and things happen, losing control. And you come to realize that he's just a human being. And I remember this other incident. I think UNSA lecturers, I think, were boycotting. They had gone on strike. And Kaunda, for the first time in his life, was reacting to situations. You see, it's like somebody was desperate, putting out the fires. And I remember we were part of a team of lecturers that went to State House because the Kaunda was trying to contain this situation, that situation. And one of them was a problem with the lecturer at the university. And we sat there and we were given lunch, by the way. And I was able to see this man close by and just realize that it's just flesh and blood like me. And I remember him saying, you know, gentlemen, people think being president is easy. It's not actually easy. You know, like right now, I have to worry about whether the people in Kaputa have food. I have to worry about people in Shangombo and so forth. Now, he was referring to President Chiluba then, who were the so-called multi-party advocates. And he said, if you don't know, right today, I've just managed to sleep for about 3 hours. But the point is that the events that followed later on was that the man lost power. And I came to realize for the first time that where the real power lies, it doesn't lie with the president. Real power lies with the people collectively, you know? So that was my first introduction. And subsequently, I mean, the shocking thing for me about how destructive government power could also be was when Kaunda was declared stateless. You know, can you imagine somebody who has ruled the country for 27 years who was considered father of the nation, and all of a sudden is stateless.
Could you just say more about how that came to be? Because
Yes.
he was our leader, he was
Yes.
head of state, and then how was he declared stateless?
Well, there was an issue now that came up. You know, that's how you can experience the brutality of a government system which has run amok. And that is why it is always very important to keep those in government in check. So all of a sudden, from nowhere, Kaunda's nationality became an issue. And in the process, there was now an issue to say, no, actually, he wasn't even born in Zambia. He's actually from Malawi. Okay. And all of a sudden, we were now told that he's actually not a Zambian citizen. And the case went to court. And that is how I joined. And I joined in to try and defend that particular position. They said, this is crazy, you know, but judges were also complicit in this particular, what I would describe as a scandal. They actually validated that, you know. So, I mean, and that was the beginning of how Zambia, that was a darling of democracy in sub-Saharan Africa, on the entire African country, now we became a joke. They said, guys, how do you get ruled by somebody for 27 years and you turn around and declare him a stateless, and then you come and say he was actually a foreigner? How could you have been ruled by a foreigner?
But for that long, for that matter.
For that long, for 27 years, we're basically reduced to jokers anyway. But my point is that it became evident that what made Kaunda was not himself, it was the office. And I came to realize that, you see, once that office is taken away from you, you're nothing, you're nobody, you know? So my second experience also was with President Chiluba, because I saw him just during that same period at Mulungushi. You know, I went up to, because by then he was still a union leader anyway. And I went up to him, and I think I had a piece of paper and said, well, can you autograph it for me? Okay. So I was able to see President Chiluba before he became president, you know, and somehow the man ended up being president, you know. But with that experience, you know, for maybe, and that's why I consider myself somewhat privileged, because I've had these experiences. I've seen them before office. For Kaunda, I saw him after office. For Chiluba, I saw him before assuming the office of president, and after he left office. And my partner and I spent 7 years defending President Chiluba. And for me, that was a very shocking experience, in the sense that it brought a sense of sadness also, because during that period, basically, President Chiluba was such a lonely person. All the people that he knew basically scampered. They all ran away from him, you know, and the only person that stood by him was his wife. All the friends. It was like a leper, you know. So you come to realize the nature of the power that resides in that office. But ultimately, the real power lies with the people. You know, my second interaction.
Particularly, John, if the people are also aware of the power they naturally wield.
Yes. The sad part is that people don't realize this. And that is why I keep sending this message to say, you know what? A president is not your boss. It's actually your servant. You know, you decide when he takes over that office as president, and you decide when he leaves that office, you know. So, and I think the outcome of the election of 12th August 2021, I think underscores that point. Now, the issue is, we Zambians, have we taken to heart that lesson? You know, if we come to accept the fact that the real power lies with us, and also those that we have put in power, do they realize that that power they have is only for a short period of time, that we can decide the duration, the length of period of time that they stay in the office, you know? So that is the lesson that that I've been trying to preach through both this interview, and also when I have a chance to go to court, is to be able to show that, you see, nobody's above the law. Even the president is subject to the law, you know. So, I mean, the most dramatic one, if I may conclude, let me jump a few. The most dramatic experience is actually one with President Lungu. You know, during the period I was narrating where we are defending President Chiluba, Lungu was a lawyer, and we used to represent some of the people that were jointly charged with President Chiluba. He was actually, President Lungu was actually representing them. Now, I interacted with the man, okay? And I'm sorry to say this, it struck me as a very disciplined lawyer. He wasn't. He was totally indisciplined. And
why? How?
What?
How?
Oh, you mean?
What made you conclude he wasn't a very disciplined lawyer?
Well, because on a number of occasions, we had to assist him. I had to assist him. Okay, you could reach a stage whereby you're appearing in court. The man doesn't know where you ended because these cases went on for a long time. Now, you had to remind them to say, oh, by the way, this is where we stopped, you know, and he would come totally unprepared in court, okay? And the biggest problem, at certain times, I can say this, reeking of alcohol anyway. Maybe he may have been drinking the previous night. I mean, that is part of the indiscipline, because if you know that you have a serious case and your client depends on you, the last thing you want to do is to go to court with having taken alcohol the previous night. So I have seen this man, you know, from an ordinary human being, a lawyer, you know, and I know it's God's will, because all earthly authorities ordained by God anyway. The man becomes president. Now, I have the privilege of having known this man, interacted with him at an intellectual level, not at a personal level anyway. And the man all of a sudden is president. And so for me, standing up to be able to challenge these people, and when they're trying to do wrong things, I mean, I didn't find it a problem, because I didn't see the president. I saw human beings, flesh and blood, you know. So that is what I've gone through. So it's been a very, very privileged. I mean, it's been an exciting journey career-wise on my part.
Clearly, it's an exciting journey. And John, when you talk about your hope that the people of Zambia know how much power they naturally wield, and you also then speak in the opposite and you say you hope the people in power understand that reality, that they do not have the power. Power rests in the people. If I may just add this line, when I had the privilege to work at State House, and one person who at the time was serving as Chief of Staff to Prime Minister Tony Blair said to me, Martin, as you go and work there, it will soon start feeling like you have power. If you can only remember that it is the office that has power, not you, then you might stand a chance of doing a good job.
That's right. You know, that is the lessons. You see, I mean, that's the saddest part. You know, you have actually captured it very well. You know, and for some reason, I mean, this is why, one of the reasons why people have said, why don't you aspire for public office? And I said, no, because I know how corrosive that the power that is attached to those offices. You see, it requires a very, very morally upright person who has maximum discipline and who exercises maximum personal self-restraint. But I can tell you one thing, is that even now, even with the new government sworn in, I think that reality hasn't sunk in, because people, for some reason, they think the power lies with them. And you find that the moment they occupy that office, the manner in which they walk even changes. The manner they speak changes, and they transform themselves when they shouldn't actually do any of those things. And all of a sudden, the tone changes. From the time they were asking for votes, the tone was different. When they're in the office, people change. They become totally different human beings. When they are seeking votes, right, they're very humble. Even the tone is very humble. But the moment they enter the offices, they become different human beings. And that is the nature of power. But unfortunately, we haven't learned, and the new crop of politicians appear not to have learned that reality. And
what's your advice? How can they keep their feet on the ground, even when they are in powerful offices? What does it take to remain still human, still humble, still realizing that you are serving because the people want you to? What's your advice on how they can truly be still on the ground, feet on the ground?
It is very difficult, because it comes down to the starting point is it must be clear in your head. Why are you aspiring for that office? Okay. Now, if your reasons are correct, you wouldn't have a problem in occupying that office. But invariably, it is not about service. That's the unfortunate part. 90% of the people that go into public office, it is not to serve, it is to serve themselves. But if only they can realize that they are there to serve people and that the power which they have is meant for use in order to benefit to people and not themselves, the moment they accept that reality, things will be much better. And you will see that humility in them. But unfortunately, our politics is still very raw. People go into it for themselves, okay? And some, they do it maybe for fun. They just said, well, I also want to become an MP, what? But they don't pause for a moment to say, what next once I'm an MP? That is the challenge we have. And as a result, I mean, and I've seen these things where people come to me to say, well, go into public office. I say, guys, you don't understand what public office is. It is an office of sacrifice. Now, it must be clear in your head that you're going there to work for the people and not to work for yourself. Now, as long as you get that message, you never get it wrong. But unfortunately, the people don't have these personal conversations with themselves about the very essence of power and why they want to acquire power in the first place, So I guess maybe through this kind of conversation and so forth, people may learn and become more realistic about their attitude towards power and what they do with it once it is given to them.
I'm aware that this has been a fascinating exploration of the journey you have walked, Mr. Sangwa, but also the journey that keeps on unfolding in your own personal and professional life. We got to end here for now. And in part 2, we will focus on what your ambition is, your highest aspiration for our country. Thank you very much for your time. See you next week.
Thank you. Thank you very much for having me.
Having listened to the dialogue and followed my conversation with our guest, I now invite you to look at the drawing that emerged out of that dialogue. Take time to to see the contours, the colors, the images that are reflected on the painting, on the drawing. And pay attention to what the drawing evokes in you. What thoughts, feelings, and images does this painting evoke in you with regard to the future of our country? Kindly share your reflections on this channel so that we can continue the dialogue on the future of the country we all love, on the future of our nation. Thank you.